2006 Pontiac Torrent. You wouldn't download a car. A couple months back, I reviewed a Pontiac G8 GT, an Americanized Holden Commodore that was the last gasp effort by Pontiac's performance image that launched just as the world ground to a halt thanks to a global recession. I, like many other YouTube car reviewers and historians, made the case for Pontiac post-bankruptcy, as Dodge would follow a path that Pontiac was set to follow for the 2010s. But while the G8 was a fantastic budget sports sedan that rose above its Little Tykes interior, as well as the Miata and Solstice, the rest of Pontiac's lineup was, well, crap like this. The Pontiac Torrent falls short of a lot of things, but it mostly falls short of the fun image that Pontiac was so desperately trying to exude in the late aughts. Even Pontiac's midsize sedan offering, the Malibu-based G6, did fun things like a coupe version and a fold-in hardtop convertible, on top of it visually doing a lot to distance itself from its Chevy roots. But the Torrent is just a rebadged first-generation Chevrolet Equinox. There is nothing special about this car other than the fact that it is the forgotten precursor to the GMC Terrain. Before the Torrent, Pontiac went ham for its first crossover, for better or worse, with the Aztek. A car that featured wild styling that instantly shoved it into everyone's worst cars of all time books, but was also widely forward-thinking for GM as it predicted where the car market would eventually go towards. Yeah, it's just a Montana minivan underneath, but Pontiac really tried with its removable cooler, center console, and free tent and table. There was an effort and a passion behind the Aztek. There was hope, but it was just too ahead of its time to succeed in the early aughts automotive landscape, and I will fight every Aztek detractor tooth and nail until the end of time. But as a result of the Aztek's failure, GM did the most GM thing ever and replaced it with a small crossover with the effort of a B+ high school senior with senioritis. They knew where they were going and what effort was needed for it to sell. Like sitting in it, okay, despite its Mega Bloks build quality and age, it appears fairly practical. The cargo area is massive and the seats fold almost flat. The second row has an impressive amount of leg and headroom. There's also pop-out cup holders and a charge port for the rear passengers. Front is practical, even if I think the window switches next to the shifter are goofy, but it gives an appearance of sportiness with the thin steering wheel, the clasp-like interior door handles, and the flip-up center console that provides an available space in between the front seats. But then I saw pictures of the first-gen Equinox's interior and I realized that it was the exact same one, minus the badge skin swapped on the steering wheel and the little badge on top of the center stack indicating what model you happen to be in. At least the GMC Terrain that replaced it at least gave it a blocky styling that set it apart, but man, the fact that the Torrent is just so copy-paste is such a depressing car. So how did we get here? A blob of such uninspiring American steel that gets forgotten in a sea of grays and silvers at dead malls? Well, as mentioned before, the Torrent is a rebadged Chevrolet Equinox that served as a replacement for the Aztek. The Equinox itself served as a replacement for the Chevrolet Tracker, a compact off-roader based off of the Suzuki Vitara, which in itself traces back to the original Suzuki Sidekick and Geo Tracker. But the second-gen Tracker and Vitara did their best to try to play towards being daily driver-friendly while being capable. Which honestly, both of them, they still suck on the road. Everything from harsh rides to very cramped seats. Chevy needed a proper crossover because that's what the market was leaning towards, and not a Suzuki that was essentially a budget Jeep. As much as we hate them, crossover SUVs provide a car-like ride on top of a traditional SUV's practicality and tall ride height. And that's where the Equinox hoped to slide in. More practical than a car like the Cobalt or Malibu, and more suburb-friendly than the truck-based Trailblazer. The Equinox and Torrent would sit on the long-wheelbase version of GM's Theta platform, which would be developed for GM's compact and midsize crossovers. Under the hood of most Equinoxes and Torrents would be the final iteration of GM's long-running 60-degree V6. The 3.4-liter LNJ V6 producing 185 horsepower and 210 foot-pounds of torque. And hooked up to the LNJ would be an Aisin AF33 5-speed automatic transmission. Equinox Sport and Torrent GXP models would get the 3.6-liter high-feature V6 producing 264 horsepower and 250 foot-pounds of torque, but those models are very rare as buyers weren't interested in slightly spicier crossovers at the time. The Equinox would launch in 2004 for the 2005 model year, and the Torrent would launch a year later to little to no fanfare. I remember absolutely zero marketing for the Torrent during its time, unlike the Aztec, which had the full GM hype machine behind it, and the memes that would follow. But what's amazing is, despite being an anonymous rebadge of a Chevrolet, it still outsold the Aztec almost 2-1 until the 2008 recession. Why? Why would you buy this over an Equinox? It offers nothing the Equinox didn't give you at the time. They were sold at almost the exact same price as well. All the Torrent had over the Chevrolet was the Pontiac name, and that was quickly not becoming enough to carry the Pontiac brand as a whole. And I will reiterate that the Torrent's greatest crime is its anonymity over its platform mate. There were two other Theta SUVs sold in the States, but they at least were very different, or at least tried to differentiate themselves over the Equinox and the Torrent. The second-gen Saturn Vue was essentially a rebadged Opel Antera, a German model not sold in the States, and it sat on the short wheelbase Theta chassis. And the third long wheelbase Theta crossover was the second-gen Suzuki XL7, which you can tell shares its independence with the Torrent and Equinox, but you really gotta squint to tell. And the name, Torrent. It's like they wanted to call it the Tempest, but they knew the boomers would burn down GM's headquarters in Detroit if they did. So instead, you get a synonym that most people around the age of 30 would equate more towards bricking their parents' computers trying to download Hybrid Theory for free. I really wanted to like the Pontiac Torrent, and by default, the first generation Chevrolet Equinox. I really think these are handsome crossovers for the time. They exude a ruggedness and sharp lines that later generations lost. The big ol' roof rack that's easy to adjust. The bold face on the Equinox that evokes the larger Trailblazer. Inside it looks well enough. I know it's mid-aughts GM Little Tykes plastic, but from a distance it looks well enough, and the ergonomics feel fine. The center stack mounted shifter cleans up floor space like a minivan, as well as the flip-up center console. I like the little light-up shifter indicators on this center stack, even if they're goofy and are less noticeable compared to a dash or normal indicator next to the shifter. I love the interior space. I can see why people bought these. You can easily tote a small family in these, and all their gear in the back. But my hope and optimism died as soon as I got behind the wheel of the Pontiac Torrent. It's not good at all. The previous owner did get new struts installed, but somehow the Torrent feels both floaty and harsh at the same time. Around curves, it feels like it's gonna float like an old Buick, and then you hit a bump and it punches you in the kidneys. And the steering, it's vague and heavy in a bad way. The L&J does make the Torrent feel light on its feet, but the Aisin transaxle somehow sends most of those 185 horsepower to the glue factory before they reach the ground. It wants to move, but like the Nissan Jatco CVT of the 2010s, the AF33 saps all potential joy. This is a driving experience that lives up to the vitriol that these cars got. They are not good, and that's a huge disappointment for something that does practical and styling right. Anyways, this 2006 Pontiac Torrent is a first car, or a first personally purchased car, and honestly, that's probably what it's best at. The owner, Dominic, is an engineering student at UNCC, and this is his first proper car purchase that's completely his. No mom or dad as co-signers, no borrowing the third car to take to school. Nope, all Dom's. He bought it off a friend's uncle for $2,500, which honestly isn't a bad price for a used SUV in 2023. Sure, it's got scratches and dents, but it was an old person car through and through its entire life. It's been maintained and repaired at every opportunity, and has been kept showroom clean for most of its life, which is honestly you don't really see on Torrents and Equinoxes of this age. It's a perfect car for a college student to take to school, to camp out of for IMSA events, and just be a reliable cheap car. Dominic doesn't need to care about the poor driving dynamics because he got a fantastic deal, which is all you can really ask for as a college student. But my biggest takeaway from the 2006 Pontiac Torrent is just the vast disappointment it brings me on multiple levels. It's a GM rebadge of the lowest efforts, and despite its pluses, its driving dynamics make you wish that you were driving an old pickup truck. It lacks charm, it lacks passion. It is an appliance through and through, and it's not a good one at that. These were the types of cars that drove GM into bankruptcy, and helped send Pontiac to the glue factory. I like to think of myself as a GM apologist at times, as I grew up with this era of GM. They were my childhood, and my rose-colored glasses are willing to look past much of their shortcomings. But I cannot call the 2006 Pontiac Torrent a good car. It is a low-effort product with horrible driving dynamics. A massive disappointment for a Wookie like me. Well, at least they kinda tried to differentiate the GMC terrain that replaced this. 2006 Pontiac Torrent. I think I downloaded the wrong car. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you once again for watching another episode of Wookie Drives. Huge shout out to Dominic of Charlotte, North Carolina for letting me drive his newly purchased Pontiac Torrent for this video. If you have a car or truck that you'd like to see on the show and have to be in the Charlotte or Mooresville, North Carolina area, submit your car by emailing me at wookiedrives@gmail.com. That's right, submit your car to wookiedrives@gmail.com. Don't forget to give the video a like, drop a comment with some feedback. Any sort of interaction in the comment section really helps small channels like mine grow in the algorithm. Share it with all your Pontiac Torrent friends. And finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more Wookie Drives like these. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.
Introducing Pontiac